Hi everyone, welcome back to Pages of the Globe. Today I'm going to be reading to you the short story Fat and Thin by Anton Chekhov. Now this is a realistic short story penned by the greatest Russian short story writer of the 19th century, Anton Chekhov. This story is sharp, crisp, lucid, and poignant. It just brings out the truth of how when old school friends become influential or famous personalities, we tend to do two things. Either we're jealous of them or we try to curry favor with them. Because we don't see them as old school friends anymore, but as adults with power, fame, and money. We wish to make use of them and remain in favor of the famous personality. Now, in this story, basically what happens is that there's a fat man and a thin man, and they both meet at a railway station. They were old school friends. Now, this fat man is named Misha, and the thin man's name is Porfiry. Now, when they both first meet, Porfiry thinks of himself as this great man, and he introduces everything about himself to Misha, and the amount of times he talks about his wife is kind of annoying. Basically, he thinks of himself as this really great person, and he doesn't think that Misha has done much in his life. But when Misha tells him about how he is a high-ranking counselor now, Porfiry's entire demeanor changes. Now he starts squirming around like a little rat, and he appears to have this proud personality, but within it's pretty obvious that he's quite jealous, and he feels that he can't mingle about with Misha anymore. Misha is immediately disgusted by this behavior, but this is something that happens quite often in real life, and it's a brilliant story coined by Chekhov himself. If you would like to learn more about Chekhov, you can check out my previous video, Joy by Anton Chekhov, where I talk about facts about the author and I read the story Joy. Without further ado, let's get on to the story. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below what story you would like to hear next. Fat and Thin by Anton Chekhov. Two friends, one a fat man and the other thin man, met at the train station. The fat man had just dined in the station, and his greasy lips shone like ripe berries. He smelt of sherry and orange. The thin man had just slipped out of the train and was laden with many bundles and bandboxes. He smelt of ham and coffee grounds. A thin woman with a long chin, his wife, and a tall schoolboy with one eye screwed up came into view behind his back. "Porfiry!" cried the fat man, seeing the thin man. "Is it you? My dear fellow, how many summers, how many winters!" "Holy saints!" cried the thin man in amazement. "Misha, the friend of my childhood! Where have you dropped from?" The friends kissed each other 3 times and gazed at each other with eyes full of tears. Both were agreeably astounded. "My dear boy," began the thin man just after the kissing, "this is unexpected. This is a surprise. Come have a look at me, just as handsome as I used to be. Just as great as a darling and dandy. Good gracious me. Well, and how are you? Made your fortune? Married?" "I'm married, as you see. This is my wife, Louise. Her maiden name was Van Stenbosch, one of the Lutheran persuasion. And this is my son, Nathaniel, a schoolboy in the 3rd class. This is a friend of my childhood, Nathaniel. We were boys at school together." Nathaniel thought a little and took his cap off. "We were boys at school together," the thin man continued. "Do you remember how they used to tease you so much? They used to call you Herostratus because you burned a hole in your schoolbook with a cigarette, and I was nicknamed Ephialtes because I was so fond of telling tales. We were children. Don't be shy, Nathaniel. Go near to him. And this is my wife. Her maiden name was Van Stenbosch, of the Lutheran persuasion." Nathaniel thought a little and took refuge behind his father's back. "Well, how are you doing, my friend?" the fat man asked, looking enthusiastically at his friend. "Are you in the service? What grade have you reached?" "I am, dear boy. I've been a collegiate assessor for the last 2 years, and I've the Stansfell. The salary is poor, but that's no great matter. The wife gives music lessons, and I go in for carving wooden cigarette cases in a private way. Capital cigarette cases. I sell them for a ruble each. If anyone takes 10 or more, I make a reduction, of course." "We get along somehow." I served as a clerk, and now I have been transferred here as a head clerk in the same department. I'm going to serve here. What about you? I bet you're a civil counselor by now, eh? The fat man said, No, dear boy, go higher than that. I have risen to privy councillor already. I have 2 stars. The thin man turned pale and rigid at once, but soon his face twisted in all directions in the broadest smile. It seemed as though sparks were flashing from his eyes and face. He squirmed, doubled together, crumpled up. His bundles and bandboxes seemed to shrink and crumple up too. His wife's long chin grew longer still. Nathaniel drew himself up to attention and fastened all the buttons in his uniform. Your Excellency, delighted, the friend one may say of childhood, to have turned into such a great man. Come, the fat man frowned. What is this tone for? You and I were friends as a boy. There's no need for this official obsequiousness. Merciful heavens, Your Excellency. What are you saying? Snickered the thin man, wriggling more than ever. Your Excellency's gracious attention is like a refreshing manna. This, Your Excellency, is my son, Nathaniel, and my life, Luis, a Lutheran in a certain sense. The fat man was about to make some protest, but the face of the thin man wore an expression of such reverence, sugariness, and mawkish respectfulness that the privy councillor was sickened. He turned away from the thin man, giving him his hand at parting. The thin man pressed 3 fingers, bowed his whole body, sniggered like a Chinaman. Hee. His wife smiled. Nathaniel scraped off his foot and dropped his cap. All 3 were agreeably overwhelmed.